Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Middle of May. By the time you're listening to this, if you're listening on a Sunday, it is Mother's Day. So not only happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there, all the soon-to-be mothers potentially, but also, for anybody who's listening who has a mother, has a wife who is a mother, has a sister who's a mother, anybody who's a mother in your life in one way, shape, or form, 1 degree, 2 degrees separated, wish them a happy day. Wish them a happy motherhood. Let them know how much you respect them. Let you know how much you care about them, how much you love them. Mother's Day is one of those weird holidays where, as much of an important role that mothers play in our lives, whether it's, just from our initial conception to, kind of being there throughout our lives. They're not there just for the first, 18 years or however many years you're in the house. They are there throughout your life. And, for somebody who has both a mother who I'm very fortunate is still here with us, as well as, having a wife who is a mother of 2 children, you do, learn to respect that motherhood, that lifelong journey of motherhood, much more over life and the more that you see it up close and kind of experience its journey over time. So hope everybody's having a good Mother's Day. If you're listening to this on Sunday and if you're listening to it on Monday or Tuesday, make sure that if for some reason you didn't call your mom or maybe your mom's unfortunately not with you anymore, make sure you're spending some time thinking about her, thinking about what your mom meant to you and, what you can do to be a good child to your mom, if you will. I thought about, there was a couple of things, Sunday Perspective show. I got to thinking about a couple of things in terms of, how to kind of weave the Mother's Day theme, just because it coincidentally fell on this Sunday, kind of into the conversation. And so what I kind of want to do before we go to the break is I want to kind of throw out a couple questions to folks, and I'll give my own answers, but would love to hear your answers as well, or just something to think about and ponder. First is, how did your mother support or encourage you? What do you remember about your mom, going above and beyond to help you? And the reason I ask this is, it's always a good, thing to sort of think back on that, especially if you're at that age where maybe you're, beginning to think about having a family. Maybe you are beginning to have a family, and you're trying to think about, are there things from my childhood that you especially appreciated, things that you look at as being foundational building blocks to become the person that you are today or the person that you want to become. I know in my case, my mom was very, very hands-on, in terms of, being involved with the things that I was doing. In some cases they were things that, she could help with a lot. I remember her being, great at, editing papers for me, or at least, kind of going through and making suggestions. I remember her sitting down and reading me words before we did a spelling bee at the school spelling bee level, because she had much more of a background in writing and editing and those types of things. But also she wasn't afraid to go out in the backyard and hit me ground balls, even though she'd never played any softball or baseball or anything. Because she knew I love playing baseball and she wanted me to get practice. So, there's always going to be things that mothers do to encourage you. Think about that a little bit, appreciate that. The second question I was thinking about was, what lessons did your mother, give you, during your childhood or even today that you carry forward to this day? And those could be lessons that are part of your day-to-day life, just trying to be a good person, or whether they are, trying to help you that you can apply them to the business world. I think in my case, my mom, probably a couple of things that she always stressed. She always stressed education. She always made it very clear that, and maybe this was, just because of the nature of her personality, she was maybe a little more introverted than extroverted. But, she always, pointed out that, your education is something that you can own. It's something that, you can use as a building block to become a better person or to become more qualified in whatever field you want to be in. She was very adamant that we didn't lie or steal, that we were honest people. And I think that mindset, whether it was, I remember vividly one time we were at the grocery store and the lady at the checkout counter gave us back too much change from the bill. So maybe we gave her $20 and she gave us back $7 when she should have given us $4. And we left the store and we went home, and my mom realized that she had been given too much money, and without any thought went back to the store and and took that money back and made sure that she didn't chastise the person for making mistakes. She just wanted to make sure that the right amount of money was given to her, and that wasn't something she deserved or she should have taken. She felt like it was stealing. So that was always in our mind. Don't cheat or steal. Don't lie or steal as well. Just get what you deserve to do. Don't cheat the system. Don't lie to mislead somebody. And then the third thing was, she was always a stickler about kind of doing your best and being as precise as you can possibly be. There's lots of times in your life when you can go, oh, well, that's good enough, or that's fine. And her thing was always, look, if you recognize A, that it could be better, and B, you have the time to make it better. And that might have meant, you spent a little extra time doing it, or you reprioritize something. You should always be doing that. And I think sometimes we get hung up in this industry, thinking a little bit about minimum viable products and, it's good enough. Don't worry about it. Put the burden on somebody else to fix it or figure it out. And she was very adamant about, your work, your quality of work is going to be something that is your reputation, and you need to own that reputation, and you own the quality of your work, and be proud of the quality of your work. And so anyways, and then the last thing is, how often you keep up with mom. Hopefully you are checking in with her periodically, once a day, once a week, whatever it is, but make sure you find a pattern in doing that. So anyways, this is not going to be a Mother's Day show. But I did want to give Mother's Day proper due before we jump to the break, and hopefully get you thinking a little bit about what your mom means to you, and what you can do to be a better son or daughter to your mom. So with that, I'm going to dive into the second part of the show, kind of weave this together with some interesting thoughts that I've been thinking just around some of the AI stuff that's out there. I'm not trying to turn every Sunday into an AI show, but there is a lot out there right now that's making us think. So we're going to get to that right after the break. Are you looking to stay ahead of the curve in the latest trends in enterprise tech? Look no further than the Breaking Analysis podcast with Dave Vellante. This data-driven program dives into the most important topics facing the enterprise tech industry today. With a data-first approach that leverages ETR's renowned surveys of IT decision-makers and insight from the CUBE community, Breaking Analysis delivers in-depth research on the most important topics facing technologists and IT buyers. Whether you're a business leader, an IT professional, investor, or just an avid follower of the industry, this podcast is a must-listen. Just search Breaking Analysis Podcast wherever you get your podcast, and tune in today to stay ahead of the game in enterprise tech. And we're back, and appreciate everybody listening through my Mother's Day, soliloquy, if you will, intro there. Maybe a little longer than we usually do for the intro section, but wanted to give it proper due. Now, like I've mentioned a million times on the Sunday Perspectives, I'm always looking for something that's interesting, and then always trying to weave it together with a couple of things, because I think sometimes when we compare or contrast a couple of interesting topics or ideas, we find a little more connectivity between things. We paint a little bigger picture for ourselves. And something that I was thinking about not too long ago, maybe a couple of weeks ago, the idea came to me, was I was reading through a number of articles, a number of people who had been doing some work with generative AI, which I think a lot of us right now are playing around with. While there are a million newsletters and a million Twitter threads, and people are already out there, with now all of 6 months of experience or whatever, claiming to be an expert or whatever. I think a lot of us are rightfully experimenting, because there is some pretty interesting things you can do with it. And one of the things that I've noticed, a lot of what we see is the amazingness, the incredibleness. But what I do see from time to time is people that dig into it a little bit, who are looking at it with a curious eye, with a pragmatic eye, if you will. And one of the things that seems to come up quite a bit is this idea that, you need to be a little bit careful in, let's just use sort of ChatGPT or ChatGPT-like type tools. When you ask it to do something for you, write me a such and such, answer a question for me, give me an outline for something. And again, all perfectly valid prompts and things that are hopefully going to help you be more productive, speed up some things, maybe help you learn about something. And what a lot of times we're seeing examples of is a perfectly well-structured answer, a perfectly well-structured set of information that comes back and framework for where it comes back. And then somebody will go through it and say, that on the surface looks fantastic. That looks very, very interesting. It's great that you were able to pull all that together, but it's wrong. It's just, either partially incorrect or nearly incorrect. And we don't see this all the time, right? There are many times when, people are beginning to use these tools and they're getting very valid information out of it, information that can be, pulled from the models that exist today, the large language models. But there's also times when, there are things that happen and the system just hasn't quite figured out how to make sense of it. And what dawned on me as I was thinking about that was there was this, the thing that sort of keeps coming up over and over again for the people that are experimenting and finding this and seeing these examples is they sort of come back and they go, if I read this and I didn't have any experience on this, I could very well feel like this is an authoritative type of thing. This is a well-reasoned type of response and just take it and copy it. Right. And this isn't a statement on plagiarism or anything along those lines. But what these folks sort of come back and say is we're going to run into a situation in which we're going to find people or entities or tools that are going to take the answers that they get and not have the ability or the experience. The experience is probably the most important thing, or the expertise to know whether or not it's valid or not. And I highlight this as sort of unique. Now, we've always had this problem with the internet because while the internet, collects all sorts of information, you're using a Google search, whatever it might be, oftentimes you felt like the answer was right because you were not necessarily getting an answer back. You were getting a link to something. You were getting a pointer to some data. It feels like now the system is trying to connect the dots on things. And again, we're sort of inherently kind of trusting it because we've been conditioned over time to trust the internet, at least to a certain extent. And some people still have a very, weary eye or cautious eye about how much they trust. But my point about all this is it's going to be really interesting to figure out how people go about applying a level of experience or expertise to the day-to-day things that they do to interact with these systems. And the reason I brought all this stuff up was it got me thinking, are we going to see sort of an interesting new partnership? Because what tends to happen with new technologies is we tend to have this normal sort of oftentimes age-based kind of diversion or, diversification or split, right? So, older people tend to use the older technologies. They've been able to, make use of it. They've been successful with it. And then the new technologies come along and they're oftentimes very different than older technologies. And again, whether or not the new stuff turns out to be better or worse or whatever, again, is on a case-by-case basis. But what often happens is there's a perception that goes on in the industry or just a normal thing that happens where it's like, okay, that technology is for the olds, this technology is for the news, and, the two sort of never connect in the middle because there's this, kind of like, well, if the new was so much better, it would have done it a long time ago or whatever it is, right? Or the old so much better, well, you people you're not willing to change, you're not open to change and so forth. And what dawned on me was, I think we're going to see, and I'm not exactly sure how it'll shake out. I'll be curious to look for examples. I think we're going to see sort of a new pairing or new partnership happen between older generations and newer generations in which, and this is where I sort of come back to the Mother's Day sort of parenting thing. If you're a parent today and you have kids, especially if you have, kids that are beyond about 6th grade, 10 years old or whatever, there's a weird thing that happens in which, the younger kids, all the way up to teenage kids and into, 20-something kids, at some point reach a point where they think, I know everything. I've got it all figured out. I know the world. I can figure everything out in the world. And you're constantly kind of doing this thing as an adult who has lived experiences, and some may be great experiences and some may be, scars and scab knees and terrible experiences, but they're learned experiences in which you are trying to find the right balance between going, you shouldn't do that thing. And the reason you shouldn't do that thing is because this bad thing will happen, or this negative outcome will happen, or the thing that you expect to happen isn't what's going to happen because that's not how life really works, or something along those lines. And there's a natural tension between, I don't want to listen to you, whether it's because of authority or I already know what I know and I don't need your feedback. And I think what's going to be very interesting from a business perspective is like, that's fine for day-to-day things, right? Oh, should I mix beer and wine? Should I drive too fast? Should I, whatever? Should I wear these clothes or something like that? But in the business world, and the personal world, you can do those things because it's your own sort of reputation and you make mistakes and nobody really, really cares. But in the business world, it's a little different, right? You're dealing with the reputation of who you work for, and you're dealing with the reputation of your organization. And so people depend on you, and you're making decisions that have financial ramifications, some cases small and some cases large. And so I'm wondering, if given this core technology that's out there, we know that today it makes these mistakes, and I forget the exact name for the mistakes that they make. I think they're called like delusions or something like that. I'll have to look it up. I'll put it in the show notes. But and we know that it sort of suffers from, in some cases, a sort of lack of experience or lack of expertise or fact checking or whatever the right term is. If we will start to see some pairing together of experienced people with inexperienced people for some periods of time, right? The same way that we do sort of new hire onboarding, which has sort of gone away because businesses, now are sort of like, well, I expect you to come on board and be smart. I expect you to know stuff, and I don't necessarily want to train you. But I do wonder if this new generation of technology will sort of reinvigorate this idea of, how do I onboard employees? Do I do that just simply through some sort of training model, or do I do it through pairing them with people that have deeper expertise? And again, I don't know what the exact model for that would be, because oftentimes the people with deep expertise, you don't necessarily want to pair them and sort of waste their time, if you will, with people with little expertise. But maybe there are going to be scenarios in which, excuse me, we do have some sort of pairing of experience with inexperience. Because again, the systems themselves we know are flawed or have flaws in which that lack of experience could be very detrimental, and could be the ingredient to something bigger that becomes something bigger. And if the core of information is incorrect, potentially becomes sort of problematic. So anyways, that was sort of the thought that I had. I'll be curious if people have feedback on this. It is something that I think as an industry, as we start to see more and more interesting examples of how these technologies are used, especially the conversational AIs, generative AIs, those types of things, as they become used and become more mainstream, and again, this is going to happen. You should plan for it. How do you avoid the inexperienced mistakes, the lack of awareness mistake, the lack of context type of mistakes that happen? Because I think it's something that we have to be conscious of. I think we'll see it happen in one big example at some point, maybe this year, maybe next year, in which it'll sort of raise itself up to a broader conscious in the mainstream, in mainstream media, mainstream conversations. But I think it'll be interesting because I do feel like it has a little bit of sort of the training and onboarding, the mixing of generations, the parental control versus, I want my freedom kind of thing. And anyways, I will be interested in your feedback. I'll be interested in any sort of examples that you may have in which this comes to play, or if you want to just tell me like, hey, you know what, you should not spend any time worrying about that because the systems are getting so much faster, so much smarter, so much quicker that percentage of errors or those types of errors are going to be reduced from whatever they are today to 10x less of that within a year. So don't worry about it. So would love to kind of hear feedback from people on this. Just something I was thinking about as I was reading these things and thinking about, okay, we're going to become very dependent on them for not only productivity, but hopefully at some point expertise, right? That correctness, that exactness, that thing I mentioned about my mom doing early on, kind of get it right. Don't sort of slack off on it. So anyways, that kind of wraps it up for today. Just a couple of thoughts there, both the thoughts about being a good child to your mom. Hopefully, being respectful to your parents, but also kind of some oversight in how it'll play a role in this new burgeoning, emerging technology space. So, anyways, with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you all for listening. Hope you all are enjoying some time with your mother on Mother's Day if you're listening on Sunday. And with that, I will wrap it up. Talk to you next week. Thanks for everybody for sharing it with a friend, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.